There is a village in Spain where all the residents share the same surname, not because they chose to, because no one else ever arrived. There is a town carved directly into a cliff face, not built against it, not leaning on it, into it. The stone is the wall is the mountain. The people who live there have not gone anywhere because there is nowhere else to go. There is a place in the Spanish interior that appears on medieval maps, appears in Roman records, appears in the diaries of travelers from the 1800s, and has been emptying ever since. The last census recorded 11 people. The census before that recorded 23. The one before that, 40. The math only goes one direction. Spain is not a country most people associate with isolation. It is the country of flamenco and football and packed terrazza bars. But Spain also contains some of the most depopulated land in Western Europe. The interior, the Meseta, the deep Pyrenean valleys, the high Sierras, has been losing people for over a century. Villages, founded in the Iron Age, rebuilt by the Romans, held through the Reconquista, bombed in the Civil War, and then quietly abandoned when the young moved to Madrid and didn't come back. What's left behind is strange. Not ruins, exactly. Not ghost towns, exactly. Something in between. Places that are still alive, just barely, in ways that will make you look at the map and wonder how they're still there at all. Today, we count down 10 of the strangest and most isolated towns in Spain. Every one of them is real. Every one of them is still holding on. Fallow Empire, number 10, Fuentidueña de Tajo, Madrid. The town that sold itself. We start with something that sounds like it belongs in a different kind of video. A corporate story, maybe, or a real estate cautionary tale. Fuentidueña de Tajo is a small municipality in the community of Madrid. About 900 people. A river, some farmland. The kind of quiet that gets called charming in travel articles, and suffocating by the people who grew up there and left. In 2003, the entire town was put up for sale. The mayor, facing a population in freefall and no budget to maintain infrastructure, listed the municipality on the internet. The asking price was 30 million euros. This included the town hall, the church, the school, the streets, and every piece of public land. The town, the whole town, the international press ran with it. Headlines in a dozen languages, calls from investors in Germany, Japan, the United States, people who wanted to buy a village, to own it, to do something with it. Nothing came of it. No buyer materialized. The town did not sell. It still exists, still slowly losing population, still sitting in the community of Madrid, with the peculiar distinction of being the municipality that once tried to liquidate itself. The mayor at the time said he didn't see another option. He may have been right. He may just have been early. A version of this story is playing out across rural Spain right now, in towns too small for headlines, but facing the same arithmetic. A place so emptied that the only move left was to offer it to a stranger. And the stranger didn't want it either. Number 9. Zagra, Granada, the town that reversed. Most depopulation stories go one direction. This one went backward. Zagra is a small village in the province of Granada, Andalusia. For decades, it followed the standard rural Spanish script. Young people leaving, elderly population aging out, services disappearing, slow decline. By the early 2000s, the population had dropped to the point where the village school was under threat of closure. Then something happened. A Dutch artist named Ruud Janssen discovered Zagra in the late 1990s. He began a project, an international mail art initiative based in the village, drawing correspondents and eventually visitors from across Europe. Word spread in certain circles. Artists, writers, people looking for somewhere cheap and quiet and real. A small number of foreigners began arriving. Some stayed. By 2010, Zagra had a functioning international community, not a large one, but one that had halted the population decline and given the village a second demographic pulse it had no right to expect. The school stayed open. The original residents and the newcomers did not always agree on what Zagra was supposed to be. That tension between the village as a home and the village as a project is unresolved. It may never be resolved, but the lights are on. That is not nothing. Number 8. Ainsa, Aragon. The town time sealed in stone. Ainsa is not dying. Ainsa is something else. A town that stopped in the 12th century and never resumed. The medieval walled city of Ainsa sits at the confluence of the Tinca and Ara rivers in the Aragonese Pyrenees. Population of the historic core, a few hundred. The walls are intact. The Plaza Mayor is a Romanesque square from the 1100s, unchanged in its bones. The Church of Santa Maria dates to 1181. The castle is older. Everything in the old city is made of the same honey-colored stone, and everything is exactly where the medieval builders left it. This is not a reconstruction. It was not restored for tourism. It simply survived. The Pyrenean geography that isolated Ainsa from the modern world also insulated it from the forces that would have demolished it to build something new. For much of the 20th century, Ainsa was too poor and too remote to modernize. The roads came late. Development passed it by. By the time anyone thought to preserve it, there was nothing to preserve it from. The town had never changed. The lower modern town has grown up around the historic core. It has restaurants, a hotel, a small supermarket. But the upper town, the medieval walled city, sits above all of that on its promontory, looking at the same valley it has always looked at, made of the same stone it has always been made of. Locals speak of the upper town the way you speak of a relative who has been very ill for a very long time. It is still here. We are not sure how. We are not asking questions. Number 7. Zugarramurdi, Navarre, the town the Inquisition burned. There are towns in Spain that carry the weight of specific historical violence. Zugarramurdi carries more than most. Zugarramurdi is a small village in the Navarrese Pyrenees, near the French border. Population around 200. It has a cave system nearby, large, dramatic, with a stream running through it, that has been used for shelter and ceremony since prehistory. It is a beautiful place. It is also the site of one of the most documented witch trials in Spanish history. In 1609, the Spanish Inquisition investigated allegations of witchcraft in Zugarramurdi. The testimony collected was extensive and detailed: Sabbaths in the cave, animal transformations, nocturnal assemblies. The Inquisition took it seriously. 11 people from the village were tried. 6 were burned in effigy. 3 were burned in person. The village never fully recovered from the reputational damage. For generations, Zugarramurdi was known as the Witch Village. People from other towns kept their distance. Marriages outside the village became harder to arrange. The social isolation compounded the geographic isolation until the two were indistinguishable. The cave is now a tourist attraction. There is a museum of witchcraft in the village. The annual festival includes theatrical reenactments of the Sabbath. The village has, in a sense, monetized its trauma. Whether this is dignity or something else is a question Zugarramurdi's 200 residents are still quietly working out. The cave exists. The stream still runs through it. At night, away from the tourist infrastructure, it is not difficult to understand why someone told a story about it once, and why that story destroyed a community. Number 6. Trasmoz, Aragon, the town that was excommunicated, not the people, the town. Trasmoz is a small village in the province of Zaragoza, Aragon. Population, roughly 50. It sits at the foot of the Moncayo mountain range, in a landscape of scrubland and eroded rock that feels geologically older than it has any right to. The castle above the village dates to the 10th century. In the 13th century, Trasmoz was excommunicated by the Catholic Church. The precise cause is disputed. It may have involved tax disputes with the nearby monastery of Veruela. It may have involved the village lords using the castle to shelter people the church wanted handed over. The reasons have blurred over 7 centuries. The fact has not. The excommunication was never formally lifted. Trasmoz remains officially under ecclesiastical censure. It is believed to be the only municipality in Spain, possibly in the world, still under an active medieval excommunication. The church does not publicize this. The village does not deny it. A local literary festival has grown up around the town's reputation for sorcery and heresy, drawing writers and poets to a place that the medieval church marked as spiritually contaminated. The castle ruin watches over everything from the ridge. The 50 residents go about their lives. Every so often, someone asks whether the excommunication will ever be reversed. No one has been able to find the right authority to ask. Number 5. Belchite, Aragon, the town that was never rebuilt. Most of this list is about survival. Belchite is about the decision not to survive. The original Belchite, Pueblo Viejo, the old town, was destroyed in August and September of 1937 during the Spanish Civil War. The Battle of Belchite was one of the bloodiest engagements of the conflict. Republican and nationalist forces fought street by street, building by building, for 3 weeks. When it ended, the town was rubble. Francisco Franco, after winning the war, made a specific decision about Belchite. He ordered that the ruins be preserved exactly as they were. A new town was built nearby for the surviving residents. The old town was left as a monument to the war, to the cost of resistance, to whatever lesson Franco intended to teach. The ruins have stood untouched since 1937, more than 80 years. The walls are still standing in places, shot through with holes. The church tower still rises above the rubble. Signs mark where buildings used to be. The street grid is still legible. The war is still legible. Franco is dead. The lesson he intended is contested. The ruins remain. Visitors walk through Pueblo Viejo now as a kind of pilgrimage. The Spanish government has debated what to do with it for decades. Restore it, stabilize it, leave it, interpret it. No consensus has emerged. The town continues to fall apart at its own pace, stone by stone, season by season. The new Belchite is a few hundred meters away. People live there. They look at the old town. They do not talk about it constantly, but it is always there. Number 4. Granadilla, Extremadura, the town that was emptied for a flood that never came. Granadilla is a walled medieval village in the province of Cáceres, Extremadura. Founded in the 12th century, a castle, a church of Santa Ana, a Jewish quarter, a Muslim quarter, a complete small city infrastructure that took centuries to accumulate. In 1965, the Franco government ordered the evacuation of Granadilla. The Gabriel Y. Galán Reservoir was being expanded, and the government determined that the village was at risk of flooding. All residents were relocated to newly built settlements nearby. The village was abandoned. The reservoir expanded. Granadilla did not flood. The water level never reached the village. The evacuation that displaced an entire community was, in the end, unnecessary. The village sat empty for 15 years. Then, in 1980, it was selected as a site for a youth employment training program. Young people from across Spain were brought in to learn traditional construction trades, stonemasonry, carpentry, roofing, by restoring Granadilla's buildings. The work continues intermittently to this day. Granadilla is occupied during restoration periods and empty the rest of the time. There are no permanent residents. The castle is partially restored. The church is partially restored. The streets are clean. The buildings are structurally sound. It is a village kept alive by the act of being repaired. The day the repairs stop is the day it becomes a ruin. No one has committed to what happens after. Number 3. Aniel, Aragon, the village Julio Llamazares couldn't save. Aniel is not famous. It is famous for a book about it being empty. The village of Aniel sits in a narrow valley in the Aragonese Pyrenees, at around 1,100 meters elevation. It was abandoned in 1970 when the last family left. By then, it had been emptying for decades, the young leaving for Huesca, for Zaragoza, for anywhere with work and warmth and something happening. In 1988, the Spanish writer Julio Llamazares published La Lluvia Amarilla, The Yellow Rain. The novel is narrated by the last resident of a fictional Pyrenean village, a man named Andrés, who has watched everyone he knew leave or die, and who sits alone in the empty village waiting for his own death. The fictional village is unmistakably Aniel. The book became one of the defining literary works of Spanish rural depopulation. It was translated into 20 languages. It made Aniel briefly famous. People came to see the village the book described. Writers and photographers, walkers, people who had read Llamazares and needed to see the place with their own eyes. None of them stayed. The village is still empty. The stone houses are collapsing slowly under the weight of winters. The church roof fell in at some point. No one recorded exactly when. The paths between the houses are overgrown. A few doorways are still intact. You can walk through them into rooms open to the sky. A novel gave this village its obituary. That obituary has now outlasted every physical structure in the village. Number 2, Rio Frio de Aliste, Zamora, the town with one surname. We mentioned this in the introduction. Here is the full story. Rio Frio de Aliste is a small village in the province of Zamora, in the region of Castile and León. It has a population of under 30 people. For generations, for as far back as anyone has been able to trace, virtually every resident of the village has shared the same surname, Riesco. This is not coincidence. It is not a naming tradition. It is the product of extreme isolation over centuries. The village sits in a remote valley in the comarca of Aliste, a region so geographically enclosed that outside contact was limited for most of its history. People married people from the village because there was no one else to marry. Surnames consolidated. The genetic diversity of the community narrowed. Today, Spanish researchers studying the genetics of isolated populations use villages like Rio Frio de Aliste as study sites. The community is, in genetic terms, as close to a closed system as you can find in a modern European country. The people who live there are aware of this. They do not find it remarkable because they have always known it. What the outside world calls strange is, to them, simply the village. The valley is beautiful. The river is clean. The houses are old and solid. The population is declining, under 30 now, most of them elderly. In a generation, the surname Riesco may be all that remains of Rio Frio de Aliste, a name without a village, an identity without a place. Number 1, Villanueva de Acosta, Burgos, the town that sold itself for €1. This is the one that closes the loop. We began with Fuentidueña de Tajo, a town that tried to sell itself for €30 million and found no buyers. The market has since corrected. Villanueva de Acosta is a village in the province of Burgos, in the high Castilian Meseta. It had a functioning community until the mid-20th century. Then it emptied. The same story as 1,000 other villages across the Spanish interior. Young people to the cities, old people dying, services withdrawn, schools closed, the village becoming quieter every decade until quiet became silence. By the early 2000s, Villanueva de Acosta was effectively abandoned. A private owner acquired it, the whole village, the buildings, the land. In 2012, it was listed for sale at €1. €1. This was not a misprint. The asking price was €1, with the condition that the buyer invest in restoring the village and committing to some form of habitation or use. The listing attracted international attention, hundreds of inquiries, feature stories in European newspapers, the romance of owning a village for less than the cost of a coffee. A buyer was eventually found. The village changed hands for €1. What happened after is the part the romance glosses over. Restoration of an abandoned village is not a weekend project. It requires engineers, architects, permits, construction crews, budgets that dwarf any asking price. The infrastructure, water, drainage, electricity, had decayed past the point of simple repair. The buildings required structural intervention before they could be safely inhabited. The new owner worked on it. Progress was slow. The village is partially restored. It is not fully inhabited. It exists in the same liminal state as Granadilla, alive, because someone is paying attention, not yet alive in the full sense. €1 bought a village. What it costs to bring a village back is a different number. No one has published that figure yet because no one has finished the work. 10 towns, 10 different versions of holding on. A town that tried to sell itself and found no takers. A town excommunicated by a medieval church that never reversed the decision. A town destroyed in a civil war and preserved as a monument to destruction. A town emptied for a flood that never came. A town whose entire population shares one name because no one else ever arrived. And a town that sold for a single euro, a price that told you everything about what the market thinks a dying village is worth, and nothing about what it would actually cost to save one. Spain has been losing its interior for 100 years. The cities grew, the highways came, the young followed the work, and behind them, in the high valleys and the dry mesetas and the stone-walled villages, the remainder stayed. The old, the stubborn, the ones with nowhere else to go, and occasionally the strange and the brave, who arrived from somewhere else entirely, and decided this was enough. Every location in this video is real. Every door is still closed. Fallow Empire.